Hey, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to the Endless TBR. My name is Christian, and this is my YouTube channel where I love to talk about books. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to click on this video, where I'm going to rank all of the books that I read in February of 2026 from my least favorite to my favorite. Now, it was a really solid month for me. I read 13 books total, with the caveat that three of those books were the Wild Robot trilogy by Peter Brown. So, very, very simple children's novels. For the sake of this ranking, I'm just going to include that trilogy as one entry. Their books are so easy and so simple to get through that I decided I can just cover the entire story in just one entry. And then there's also one short story that I read for school that I wanted to talk about. It was about an 85-page short story, so like the length of a very short novella. And I decided that I enjoyed the story enough that I just wanted to include it in this ranking. So there's going to be 12 things total that I will be ranking for this video. And let's get into it. All right, so coming in at number 12 is The Emerald Queen Rises by Megan Sally Massey. This was the book that was chosen as part of the book club that I'm in for this month, and I thought this book was terrible. I do not like to talk bad about books very much. There's only been one other book on this channel that I've really said bad things about, and that is The Prophet of Yonwood from the City of Ember series. I really did not like that book at all. Unfortunately, The Emerald Queen Rises is right alongside that. I just thought this book was overall not good. I thought the writing was poor, the world building was poor, the characterization was poor. It was just it was so bizarre. I don't even really know how to talk about it. The premise of the story is it's basically this romantasy, and you have this land that is called Elysium, and they have an enemy land that is called Stoltland, and the whole world has this plague, as it's so called, that is basically envy. It's like the highborns are get envious of each other and they cause wars and all this stuff. And so Elysium is kind of like the highborns of Elysium are kind of like this last bastion for like non-envious leaders. And so they're trying to like spread their good throughout the land. And this book follows a new queen named Selin, who is the up and coming queen for Elysium, and she's dealing with the enemy's like aggression towards them and jealousy towards them, while at the same time there's this romance going on between her and one of the young princes from Stoltland, and so drama ensues in that area. And it just wasn't good. Like, I don't really know what else to say about it. The only saving grace that didn't make me DNF this book was the fact that the author had an overwhelming obsession with describing food in her story. And you know that might make sense if like the main character was like a chef or a cook or something like that. But no, there's no aspect of the story itself where the food is important. The author just really, really liked going into these pages long descriptions of food. And so my fiance and I turned it into a bit of this game where we were highlighting all of the sections in the story that had to deal with food description. And it ended up being dozens and dozens and dozens of pages. And so we got a good kick out of that. And that was kind of like the one saving grace that like kept me going, was looking for those food descriptions. But overall, I just everything about this book I didn't like. I just think it was really poorly written. And I hate saying that because I don't like talking badly about books, but I couldn't get around that fact. This was just not a good book at all. Coming in at number 11 is an audiobook that I read at the very beginning of the month, and that is Love Under Different Skies by Nick Spalding. This was an audiobook I just kind of picked up because I was like, I'm in between audiobooks right now. I don't know what to read. Nick Spalding has been a consistent throughout the last year for me as being an author that I can just sit back and listen to a very easygoing story that I don't have to like think about too much. At the beginning of this month, I really needed that. I just needed a story that I could kind of like not zone out during, because I still do like to pay attention when I'm listening to audiobooks. I hate it when you're listening to an audiobook and then you zone out and then you come back like 20 minutes later and you have no idea what's going on in the story. I try not to do that. And if I do that, I rewind. But I needed a book that I could just sit back and know that there was nothing complicated that I was going to have to think about a lot during the story. And so I chose Nick Spalding's book here, Love Under Different Skies. It's basically the story of this couple in London. The wife gets an opportunity in Australia to work for this chocolate company. And so the couple moves down to Australia, and they have to just learn to survive in this new area. And Australia has the stereotype where everything down there is trying to kill you. And so Spalding plays into those tropes a lot in this story, and the couple has to deal with a lot of extreme wildlife and extreme weather conditions and stuff like that. So it was an entertaining story, not a bad read at all. I gave it like a 3 stars, like, but I wouldn't say it was incredible. Definitely not near Spalding's best, but at the time, it was just a really nice story that I could just kind of like disconnect from the world and just enjoy a couple silly moments throughout this book. So that is Love Under Different Skies by Nick Spalding, coming in at 11. Coming in at number 10, it's a story that I feel bad putting low on this list. It is a story that I had to read for school, and it is called The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. When it comes to this list, this is why I always like to say this is based off of my personal enjoyment of the stories as opposed to like their literary prowess or something like that. If I were to remake this list and have it number one, what would be the most important book that I read this month? It would probably be The Castle of Otranto. This book is seen as like the birth of Gothic literature. It is the original Gothic story. It was written back in like the mid 1700s. I can't remember the exact year. I'm going to say like 1764 maybe, somewhere around there. But it's basically the story of this guy. His name is Manfred. He is the lord of the castle of Otranto. His son is about to be married to his bride to be when suddenly this giant comet falls out of the sky and kills him. And so Manfred realizes that he has no other sons, and now he has no way to produce him more heirs to take over the castle. So he decides on her wedding night, where her groom just died, to pursue the bride to be and basically force himself upon her and force her to have his children so that he can have a male heir. She's obviously not down for that, and she runs away in horror. And a lot of the book is him pursuing her, and then there's some outside forces that come into play. And it was actually a really interesting setup. Like I thought the first like 20 to 25 pages of this book were pretty good. Unfortunately, after that, it just drags so much. It's just a lot of characters talking back and forth, a lot of melodrama. And luckily, this book is only about 120 pages long. Otherwise, it would have been much harder to get through. But even at 120 pages, by the end of it, I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for this to be over with. And so yeah, I've never there's been some classic literature that I've really enjoyed. Like I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein a couple months ago, and I loved that. Bram Stoker's Dracula was solid. This month, I just finished The Italian by Anne Radcliffe, which I thought was really good, and that's another 1700s Gothic novel. But the Castle of Otranto itself, I just didn't really enjoy. Like I said, if I rearrange this list, it would be number one for the most important book on this list when it comes to like the history of literature. But when it comes to like my personal enjoyment and the excitement, I didn't care for it as much as I wanted to. The reason I'm putting it above like Love Under Different Skies is I had to write an essay about it, and so writing the essay, I did appreciate a lot of like the gothic tropes that the book introduced that have become very important throughout the decades and centuries for the genre. So I think it did make me appreciate a lot about the book, but the story itself just was not very exciting. So that's Castle of Otranto coming in at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is an audiobook that I listened to, and that is Snake Eater by T. Kingfisher. This is my first book by this author, and I really liked her writing style. So I definitely think I'm going to check out some more books by her. But this story, Snake Eater itself, is a mixed bag for me. So there's one aspect of the story that I really enjoyed, and there's one aspect of the story that I thought was okay at sometimes, a little weird at sometimes. So the aspect of the story that I enjoyed is basically the main plot. So you have this character named Selena. She is on the run from her abusive fiance, and she's seeking out this long lost aunt that lives in this desolate desert town. She's just trying to get away from her fiance. She's trying to find a family member to live with. So she goes out into this desert town to find her aunt. And when she gets there, unfortunately, she realizes that the aunt has passed away some time ago. So she is now completely out of money. She doesn't know what to do next. So the townspeople kind of say, "Hey, you can bunk up at your aunt's house for a little while you figure out what to do with the rest of your life, where to go next." And a lot of the story is this really heartfelt, like cozy story about this woman that is learning to live in this small desert town and get along with like her new neighbors and build these relationships. She comes from a big city, so she's learning to like disconnect from Wi-Fi and the internet and just live a simpler lifestyle that has to do with gardening and life out in the deep desert. So that aspect of the story I really enjoyed. I thought it was an awesome character piece, and Selena as a character was a really strong main character. The aspect of the story that lost me a little bit is Kingfisher introduces a supernatural element that involves some like desert gods and spirits, and her aunt specifically had a relationship with one of those spirits. That's where it kind of lost me a little bit. I thought some of the supernatural stuff was cool, but some of it I was like, I don't know if I buy into this too well. Overall, it came out as a solid story. I gave it like a 3.75. Like it was a very enjoyable read, and I think my love for the main character really propped it up for me. And like I said, I enjoyed it enough, and I liked T. Kingfisher's writing style enough that I'm definitely going to check out another one of her books. But Snake Eater for me was solid. It was a solid read. All right, coming up next at number 8, this is one of two Frida McFadden books that I listened to in audiobook form this month. Number 8 is going to be The Tenant by Frida McFadden. This was such a fun read. I've only read one Frida McFadden book before this, and it was The Teacher, and I was wildly entertained by that book. I got the Libby app recently, which basically has every Frida McFadden book available on it. So I kind of went. That's why I read two of her books this month, is because I just saw them all, and I was like, oh, I've been wanting to read some more Frida McFadden. Let me get a couple of them. So I started off with The Tenant, and this was a really entertaining story. So it's basically about this guy. He is a like a big marketing VP at a firm, and he gets fired for some reason. And so him and his fiance are struggling financially to afford their home, and so they have to bring in a tenant from the outside to basically split the cost of rent with them. And so they bring this girl in, and it turns out that she isn't exactly who she says she is. She's a little bit crazy. And those of you familiar with Frida McFadden's books, like after reading three now, I realize that she seems to very much have a formula. It's a great formula, but the formula is that a lot of the characters aren't who they seem, and they cause a lot of mischief. So, and this definitely plays into that. But it's basically the story of just like this guy getting gaslit, and I think I can't remember if his name is Blake or Drake. It's one of those two. I think I struggled with that in the last video I made about this book as well. I'm just gonna say Blake for the sake of it. I can't remember, but basically, Blake is just getting gaslit the entire time by his new tenant. But also at the same time, Blake is just a shitty dude in general. Like he was not a likable main character, and I think Frida McFadden did that on purpose. But that is the one aspect of the book that kept me from loving it more than others, is because as our main character, he was just such a resentful person, and he's misogynistic. And I was like, every time I was listening to him talk in this book, he was just pissing me off. And like I said, I think that was done on purpose. I don't think you're supposed to like any of the characters in this book at all. And with that, Frida McFadden did a great job. But there's just so much gaslighting and hatred that these main characters have towards each other. And it was really entertaining to listen to. And then by the end, which seems to be a McFadden thing, is she's got to throw some twists in there. People aren't who they say they are, and all of the reveals were very entertaining. I don't want to talk too much about this book because I don't want to give stuff away, but it's worth sticking it out to the end because I thought it was a really good ride that was very entertaining. So that is The Tenant coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is the short story that I listened to. It is called The Sandman by E.T.A. Hoffman, and this is a short story that I had to read for the Gothic literature class that I am taking. It is essentially a short story about this guy named Nathaniel, who it begins with him writing letters back and forth with his fiancee Clara, and he has just become so scared about this fairy tale that he was told about the Sandman. The Sandman is basically this guy that when children don't go to sleep, he sneaks into their room, throws sand in their eyes, and then tears their eyes out and feeds them to his children. It's basically this fairy tale to try to get kids to go to sleep. But this main character, Nathaniel, has just become so overwhelmingly terrified of the character of the Sandman, and he begins to believe that there is this lawyer who keeps going to his father's house at night to do like experiments, and he starts to believe that that guy is the Sandman. And the first half of it is just about how that is ruining his life. He is so scared to go to sleep at night. He is so scared of this guy that keeps showing up at his house. And so later on in the book, or later on in the story, his relationship breaks down with his fiance, and he ends up pursuing this other woman who it turns out isn't exactly who she says she is. A part of the story has to deal with the themes of like man versus machine, if that gives you a little hint as to where that might be going. I won't say anything else, but it was just a very interesting story. And for one that was written so long ago, I did find that there were some genuinely scary descriptions of certain events and certain characters throughout it. And I found it a lot more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. This is coming off of me reading The Castle of Otranto, which, as I said, I found to be quite boring. So I was like, oh, I hope this one's a little more exciting. And it actually was really good. And the scenes where they're laying out the lore of the Sandman itself were quite terrifying, and I liked it a lot. So I just wanted to talk about it. If you're looking for a nice like 85-page like classic literature story, I found the Sandman to be really really cool. All right, coming in at number six, I can finally hold up a physical book now. At number six, we have Heretics of Dune by Frank Herbert. This is book five in the original Dune saga, and this was a really solid book. When it comes to Frank Herbert, I love everything that this man has touched. I think he is definitely my favorite science fiction writer. I think honestly, he's the best science fiction writer that I've read so far in my life. And I love all of the way he weaves his prose and his characters and everything like that. That being said, Heretics of Dune is definitely my least favorite of the five Dune Saga books that I've read so far. I think it's still masterfully written. I love Frank Herbert's style. The issue that I had with this book is it took a really long time for me to understand and get into what was happening in the story. This book takes place 1500 years after the death of Leto II at the end of book four, and that takes place 3500 years after the original Dune saga. So we're essentially 5,000 years beyond like the era of Paul Atreides, and the politics and the state of the universe are so different from what I'm used to in the original Dune trilogy that there were many times throughout like the first 200 to 250 pages of this book where I had to stop and look at an outside source and be like, all right, what exactly is happening here? Who are these characters? Like Frank Herbert does not hold your hand, and he just starts throwing all these different characters at you and kind of expects you to just kind of pick up on it. So by the end of the story, I did enjoy it a lot. I am hoping that going into Chapter House of Dune, having this as like the groundwork will make me appreciate Chapter House more. But the reason this is a little lower on the list, even though I love Dune, is just because it did take me like 200 to 250 pages to finally start to understand what was going on. Basically, this book is all about a power struggle that is going on for the universe as we know it. When Leto II died, there was this event called the Great Scattering, where all the different factions in the universe left. Kind of leaving the Bene Gesserit, Bene Tleilax, and the Ixians in this like power struggle for the universe. And then all of a sudden, a lot of the people that scattered are coming back, and it introduces this new faction called the Honored Maiders, which are basically like the Bene Gesserit, but way more violent and way more sexual. Like they use this, sexual violence to like their advantage. And so it's about like all these different factions learning to deal with this fourth faction that is coming in to kind of claim power over the known universe. So a solid read. I love Frank Herbert. Just probably my least favorite of the five Frank Herbert Dune Saga books that I've read so far. Fingers crossed that I like Chapter House a lot. All right, coming in at number five is the final non physical book that I have to talk about. This was another audiobook that I listened to, and it is Dead in the Water by John Mars. I love John Mars. This is my fourth book that I've read by him since December. I've just been on a big kick with him. He is great. Overall, I enjoyed this book, but it is definitely my least favorite of the four that I've read by him so far. And the main reason for that is the main character just pissed me off so much in the first half of the book. So basically, this story is about this guy named Damon, and one day he's at the beach with his wife and he has a drowning accident. He drowns and his wife has to resuscitate him. As he's being resuscitated, he has basically like a life review, like one of those flashbacks back to his past. And he sees this scene in which it's him murdering this child. And he wakes up and he's like, what the hell was that? Like, I do not remember that scene, but like, he knows that it is part of his past. It was so vivid. And so he's trying to uncover these mysteries of his past and figure out what the hell that was that he saw when he was being revived. Part that pisses me off is that he finds out basically that the only way to gain more information is for him to die and then be resuscitated. And it got to the point where he did that so frequently throughout the book that I was not buying the fact that he wasn't suffering some sort of like long-term brain damage from this. And then B, basically a lot of this book was just him going around talking to people being like, I need you to kill me and bring me back. And then he's losing all of the relationships that he have with people because, if someone comes up to you and they're like, I need you to kill me real quick, you're going to be like, hell no, get away from me. And so reasonably so, he loses all the relationships in his life, but he was just not a main character whose motivations I could get behind. At a certain point I was like, listen dude, you do not need to figure out what's going on, just live your life, it is okay. But luckily John Mars is really really great really great at those third act twists and kind of bringing the story back around, and I think he did a great job with that here too. There are some revelations towards the end of the book that kind of revitalized the story for me. I still did not like Damon as a character by the end of this book, but at least the story itself was entertaining enough. It's just that first half was just him doing that over and over again, and it kind of lost me. Um, Another good thing, and I'll keep it very vague, but there's a character that returns from another John Mars book that I loved, and I thought she was handled extremely well, and it was just a very nice surprise. It's one of the reasons why I don't like to look up books ahead of time. I like to just go in blind because I had no idea that that was going to happen, and it was just a really nice build off of the previous story that that character was in. So that is Dead in the Water by John Mars. Coming in at number 4, this is a long video, sorry guys. Coming in at number 4 is The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. This is book 1 in the Robert Langdon series. Last month in January, I read Angels and Demons by Dan Brown, and so this month I wanted to read The Da Vinci Code. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I pretty much have the same thoughts that I do towards Angels and Demons as I do towards The Da Vinci Code. I thought this was a very, very fun and entertaining read, but I do understand some of the criticism that it gets. So basically, this story is about this Harvard symbologist. His name is Robert Langdon. He is supposed to meet with this, he's in France, and he's supposed to meet up with this like art curator named Jacques Sonner. I think that's how I pronounce his last name. He never hears from Jacques, and then in the middle of the night, he gets this phone call or this visit from the French police because Jacques has been found dead inside the art exhibit at the Louvre, and he has like his body is in all kinds of weird shapes and stuff, and he's written symbols all over the ground in his body in blood. And so the French police kind of call Robert in because they're like, hey, you were supposed to meet with this guy, and his dead body is covered in all these symbols. We're hoping that you can kind of take a look at this crime scene and figure out what he was trying to say. Of course, nothing goes as it's supposed to, and there's a much deeper conspiracy in here that involves like ancient religious sects and mysteries and legends and stuff like that. And so Robert Langdon, along with Sophie Nauvoo, they have to go on this mission to try to uncover what Jacques Sonner was the message that he was trying to deliver them as his dying wish. And and yeah, it was just a very entertaining book, like a fun adventure. I will say that I think Angels and Demons was a little bit stronger because that whole aspect of like every hour a cardinal is going to get executed and it's going to end with the bombing of the Vatican. To me, that plot just felt much more high stakes than what was in the Da Vinci Code. I will say the aspect of the Da Vinci Code that I liked a little bit more is it had more of a globe-trotting type feel. Like Robert and Sophie have to go to a lot of different locations. It's like we're gonna go here, we got to solve this clue. It's gonna bring us over here, and at some point they have to leave France and go to London, and it feels a little more widespread and yeah, just interesting different changes of landscape, which I really appreciated. So that aspect I felt was a little bit stronger, but that's why I feel like there were, when it comes to Angels and Demons, some aspects I liked a little bit more, some aspects I like a little bit less, and it kind of evens out. What I will say about the Da Vinci Code is afterwards, I did do a little bit of research because I've heard that Dan Brown's works are not as well received as they were when they originally came out. When this book first came out, it was a huge hit, and nowadays people are kind of like, Dan Brown, meh. I guess when it comes to the historical side of things, there are certain aspects of this book that people kind of people who are really into history roll their eyes at because it's just so outlandish and ridiculous. Obviously, this is a work of fiction, but they say that even some of the fictional elements are just so out there that it's not even a realistic story when it comes to like historical fiction. Me, as somebody that does not know the difference between Michelangelo the painter and Michelangelo the Ninja Turtle, I don't know history or art at all, and so I just kind of go along with the ride, and I'm like, yeah, sure, there's a secret map on the back of this, and da da da. I think that's actually national treasure, but yeah, I have no bearing on history at all or historical accuracy, so I enjoyed the book. And being someone that is naive in that area, but I could see based off what I read people that are really into like historical accuracy could read something like this and be like, yeah, that sucks. But I found it to be very entertaining, a solid 4-star read. I will say again, though, Robert Langdon as a main character is very flat. I get that criticism too. Besides him just being like, I'm a smart guy. I know symbols really good in history. He doesn't really have a lot of character development. They throw like a couple things in there, like, oh, he's afraid of elevators. But I think Sophie, the secondary main character, Robert Langdon's sidekick, actually had a lot more of the good of the character development, much more so than the his sidekick in Angels and Demons. I can't remember her name, but Sophie in this book was definitely the character that had the best character work and had the most development. So that is Angels. No, the Da Vinci Code coming in at number 4. Coming in at number 3, we have the Wild Robot trilogy right here. We've got the Wild Robots, the Wild Robot Escapes, and The Wild Robot Protects. So, as I said, I'm just going to talk about this as one entry. It is 3 books, but they are really, really short. Each of these books took me about an hour and a half to read because they are children's novels. But this is one of the cutest, most adorable book series that I've ever read. I love The Wild Robot so much. It is the story of this robot named Roz who crashes. She's being transported across the sea. She crashes on this island that is just filled with wildlife, and she has to learn to live amongst the animals and communicate with them. And then, as she's kind of learning to do that, an accident occurs where she becomes the mother to this baby gooseling. And so she needs to learn how to be a mother and how to raise this gooseling. And it is just the cutest story about maternity and parenthood and learning to live amongst a community. And, you know, Roz basically spends a lot of time solving different issues for the community, building housing, helping put out wildfires, fixing disputes between various animals, and it's just an adorable story. And what I would say is, if I had to rank these, I would probably put the Wild Robot Escapes in last place, and then the Wild Robot Protects in second place, and then the original book, The Wild Robot, would be my favorite. The Wild Robot is about that parenthood and learning to live amongst the civilization of animals. In The Wild Robot Escapes, which is the second book, Roz finds herself at a location outside of the main island, and it's about her trying to escape to get back home. And then the Wild Robot Protects is once Roz is back home, there's this environmental threat that is threatening the island and all the animals on the island. And so she must go off and try to solve this threat. And overall, just a really, really solid children's series. If you have a kid, I think they would love this. And if you don't have a kid, which I do not, I read these as an adult and I really enjoyed them a lot. So that is the Wild Robot trilogy coming in at third place for the month. All right, coming in at second place, I lied. There was one more audiobook, and that is the other Frida McFadden book that I listened to this month. That is The Housemaid. Now, this is, as far as I understand, by and far her most popular book. There's a movie that just came out for it in December, and I thought that movie was incredible. And I thought the book as well was incredible. This was such an entertaining read. The story is about this woman named Millie. She is a convict who is basically out on parole with the caveat that she needs to hold on to a job or else she's going back to prison. She recently lost a job at a diner she was working at, and so in order to in order to not go back to prison, she is in a rush to find another job, and she kind of secures this housekeeping job with the Winchester family. She's going to be a live-in maid who's going to like take care of the house and take care of their daughter. And so the Winchesters are filthy rich and they have this giant house. And at first glance, it seems like the Winchesters are like this perfect, wealthy, well put together, like, the perfect American family with their child and everything like that. But then you find out that Nina Winchester is just an absolute psychopath. And this book is about Millie struggling to maintain this job. She can't leave the job because she'll go back to prison, but it's getting harder and harder and harder for her to deal with Nina Winchester because she gaslights Millie. She causes a mess in the house on purpose. She, begins to accuse Millie of hitting on her husband, Andrew Winchester, and all of this is weighing down on Millie. And it's the story about her trying to deal with the insanity in this house. All the meanwhile, Nina Winchester's daughter is a little brat, and then Andrew Winchester is an extremely attractive rich man who Millie is attracted to, but she can't act upon that because she's not going to try to like get with her boss's husband, right? So as I said, kind of about the Tenet, Frida McFadden seems to be an excellent writer when it comes to writing characters that are just out of their mind and so disgraceful that you can't help but be entertained by them. And she did that again in The Housemaid. The gaslighting is incredible. There's so many entertaining sequences. And same as The Tenant, there is a twist towards the end of this book that I thought was really, really well done and really entertaining. I will say, after having seen the book, or after having seen the movie and read the book, I do think that the movie did things a little bit better. Some of the changes in the book, didn't have as much of an emotional impact on me as I thought. Like there was a moment, especially in the movie, where I was like, ooh, like cringing at it. And that moment did not happen in the book. And so I do think that the movie did it a little bit better. But overall, this was a really, really solid and entertaining read. And if you're trying to get into a Freida McFadden book, I would say this is a good place to start because there's a really good reason as to why this is her most famous book. And coming in at number one, we're finally here. Thank you so much for sticking through this video. Number one of the month for me was Ink Death by Cornelia Funke. This is book three in the Ink World trilogy, which I started back in December and then finished in February. And this was such a solid, solid bookend to this trilogy. I really enjoyed it a lot. This felt like the most mature entry into the book. For those of y'all that are unfamiliar with the series, basically it follows this um, father and daughter combo, and they have this ability to be able to read out loud. If they're reading a book, they can read things out of the book into the real world, but then the consequence for that is things from the real world get transported into the book. And where we meet up with them in Ink Death is they have been transported into the Ink world. There's this book called Inkheart in the story. They have been transported into the Inkheart book, and they've been trying to survive. There's this tyrannical king that has taken over the land called the Adderhead, and he is just sending out his forces to all of the cities and all of the places throughout the Ink world, and just causing all kinds of chaos. And we meet up with Maggie and Mo, and they are part of this like rolling band of like vagabonds, and they're trying to exist out in the wilderness and trying to figure out how to plot to get back against the Adderhead and take back the city that they love. And like I said, this book starts off right off the bat. You could tell this is a more mature story. It is a darker story, and it definitely goes to locations that the first two books don't go to. I love the character development of Mo in this book. He is definitely the main character of the story and the standout. He is such a badass, and he basically has this struggle of whether he should remain peaceful like he's always been, or he's been propped up as this figure called the Blue Jay in the story, who is this like rogue Robin Hood like type character who is out to take down all of the evil characters. Everybody in the world thinks that Mo is this Blue Jay, and so he's struggling between, do I remain peaceful? Do I remain true to myself? Or do I accept this more violent persona that people need me to be in order to restore peace to the Ink world? Um, and yeah, it was just really solid. The Adderhead, the main villain of this book, I think is significantly better. That was one of my biggest criticisms of Ink Spell, is I felt like the Adderhead was a significant step down from book one's villain, Capricorn. But in Ink Death, the Adderhead just becomes this disgusting, vile, nasty villain that every time he is on screen, the descriptions of like his character, he's basically rotting in real time for reasons that I won't get into, but his flesh is falling off and becoming, pustules and warted and all that stuff. And all the descriptions of him are just so gross. And I thought that he was really a much better villain in book 3 than he was in book 2. And all of the characters, for the most part, are really solid in this book. The only thing, I ranked this book a 4.5 out of 5. The only thing that kept it back from being a 5-star review was there were a couple characters that I felt were very important in the first 2 books that were a little sidelined, and I was sad that we didn't get to see more of those characters, and so it held it back a little bit for me, but overall, this was an incredible end to this trilogy, and definitely by far the best book in the series, and the most entertaining read that I had in the month of February, so that is Ink Death. All right, y'all. So that is my ranking of all of the books that I read in February of 2026. Thank you so much for sticking through this video. This was a really long one. I had a lot to say about a lot of these books, and I tried filming this video a couple times before, and I was like, you know what? This one's just gonna have to be really long because I kept trying to make it like really, really brief talks about each of these books, and I just couldn't do it. I really wanted to talk a lot about each of them. So thank you so much for sticking through this video. My name is Christian. This is the Endless TBR, and stay tuned for more videos about books in the future. Have a great one.